a coffee shop in a city, which is every coffee shop in every city on a day, which is every day. Hello, friends, and welcome to the 13th episode of Barista Unfiltered. I'm Jodie Lee.
And I'm Austin Miller.
We are your hosts, and we're so glad you've joined us again. Today, our guest is Dave Dellinger, and he's a barista who works in Cramerton, North Carolina. He is a self-proclaimed resident coffee geek of that community. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Good to see you both.
And if you're watching us on YouTube, you're seeing that we've got Dave on location, and I want to turn over the video right now to him so he can describe where he is and what's going on behind him.
Okay, I'll take a quick stand up here. I'm kind of in the middle centennial green of the town of Cramerton. And if I spin around here, you'll see our main drag, 8th Avenue. Floyd Blackie's coffee house is about a quarter mile behind me. The South Fork River is now behind me, and it's beautiful twilight, as you can see. Lovely little town that I've lived in a large part of my life.
That's gorgeous. And that area is home to a bustling bunch of activities, especially in the summer, right?
Absolutely. It's the park across the river there is actually busy today because it's 70 degrees here, believe it or not.
Okay.
And we don't do the canoes and kayak rentals this time of year, but that's thriving when it is a little warmer.
Canoes, kayaks, is that what he said? Did he mean that? He totally did. We're going to get there. First thing we want to know, though, what kind of coffee are you drinking, Dave?
I am drinking an Americano that I actually made on my home machine with one of my last 2 or 3 espresso blends that I created for the shop, and I honestly can't tell you which one. I just picked one and made an Americano, and it's doing the job.
How many ounces you got there?
I'm using an 8-ounce cup, and it was probably about 5 ounces total.
Okay. It's late in the day today. We're recording this on Sunday, and it's 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 5 o'clock in our worlds. So, Austin, what kind of coffee did you have today?
I opened up Spikes this morning. So first thing I had a little cortado. And then what I tend to do is just drink little bits of like brewed coffee all day, like right when it's fresh. Because as a barista, we're spoiled. We get to have the coffee as soon as you brew it. And after I drank it for a while, then I decided to add some oat milk to it and turn it into kind of like an oatmeal cafe au lait, which was good because it kind of almost felt like I was eating something. At the same time, it gives it almost like an oatmeal taste. It was really good, actually. I like that. I like it. We got a new brand finally. And
it's lowering your cholesterol.
Is it? I don't believe it. Yeah. Okay.
Whatever. What brand are y'all using?
We use Pacific, and it's funny because we started getting it maybe like became really trendy around here a couple of months ago. Everybody wanted to have oat milk, and so we had it for maybe like 2 weeks, and everybody got used to it, and there was a lot of people that wanted it, and then it was back ordered everywhere. And what we think happened is a lot of the bigger chains like Blue Bottle and Ritual and those kind of companies just bought it up. And so the supply wasn't really keeping up with the demand. But finally, I think they've ramped it up and we're able to get it again now. So we get Pacific. It's not as sweet. It's pretty good. I like it.
So, Dave, are you guys into the oat milk trend?
We haven't done it yet at the shop, but I have been experimenting with it personally. And the name escapes me right now, but there's a brand from New York. It starts with an E. They've only been in existence for about 3 months, and I've tried both their regular version and the barista version, which is supposed to foam better, and I like them both.
And it's supposed to be like the reason everybody's on it now is because it was soy, that was the original one. And then everybody kind of got concerned about the hormones in soy milk. And so people switched over to almond milk. But then there was that huge, horrible drought in California a few years ago. And people started to become really concerned about the amount of water that you use with almond milk. And so people started looking for an alternative. And it seems like a lot of people have settled on oat milk as the thing after almond milk.
I sure do love it. I think it's super creamy, and I prefer it now to whole milk. But the brand that they use at Otis, which is my local coffee shop here in Lafayette, Colorado, is Oatly, like Oatly. You ever had any of that?
I think that's the leader in the industry at this point, if I'm not mistaken.
It is super creamy. I mean, it's creamier than whole milk. Yeah.
Awesome. I haven't
Okay.
managed to get my hands on it yet, but I will.
Yeah. We've been trying to make our own oat milk here at the house, but we haven't figured out how to get the creamy texture. It's still turning out real viscous, like or not viscous, like real liquefied, like an almond milk consistency. So we'll just keep working on it here. So Dave, I know you've been working on and off as a barista for at least a few years at Floyd and Blackie's, because that's how long I've known you. Was that your first barista job? And if it wasn't, tell us when and where was your first barista job?
It was my first barista job. I've done quite a few things professionally in my life. I'm 52 years old now. Been a coffee geek for over 20 years, did a lot of stuff at home, and I lived in Atlanta for a good while. When I came back here, I needed a good coffee shop, and shortly after I moved back to Cramerton, they opened Floyd and Blackie's, and about 3 or 4 months after that, they needed someone who was into coffee pretty heavily, so I started working there and stayed there for about 3.5 years. Left to do some other things, then had a pretty major health crisis, made it through that. Got some BGA, SCA certifications, got involved with the larger coffee industry, and now I've been back since about July, where I ran into you on one of your trips here.
Yeah.
And
So how old is Floyd and Blackie's? How long has that place been there?
It opened in December of 2012.
Okay.
And for those of you who are interested in learning how to become a barista, where did you go to get your BGA certification? What company did you do that through?
Well, the first thing I did, believe it or not, one of the years they had Coffee Fest in Atlanta. And I said, okay, well, that's close enough. I'm going to go down there and check it out. And at that time, they were still doing their own barista certification. I can't remember the name of their organization, but I read their books, took the course. I think it was a 2-day hands-on and then an exam. So I got that to start with. And then I ran into some other people that told me about the SCAA at the time. And I got involved with them. And I went to a barista camp on the north side of Atlanta to do the stuff for the level 1. And got involved with the larger community, volunteered at events, went to some competitions, thoroughly enjoyed that. And then a couple years later, I did the level 2 at another one in northern New York.
So the competitions, I've heard about this because Austin, have you ever been?
I did the first Southeast Regional in North Carolina. It's been a long time since I've been to one, but yeah, I did that one. It was pretty great.
And it was in North Carolina, not the same as this Atlanta thing?
That's right. And I don't know, it could still be that was the Southeast Regional, but they had the first one in North Carolina and in Chapel Hill. And that was probably like almost 15 years ago. And I'm sure it probably moves from place to place.
So my memory of this is that a lot of the Cafe Driotti baristas would attend the competitions and they frequently won.
The year I went, the person that won was from Southern Season, which was they were also the host of the first event. And then after that, I left shortly thereafter. I wasn't in Chapel Hill for that much longer after that, so I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if someone from Driotti won. I think I know of one at least, that one Driotti barista that did win it one year.
Are you thinking of Michael?
Yes.
I remember Michael won.
Yeah.
And I think Brian Rice may have like honorably mentioned or something at one of them.
I know that mine was a disaster. It was the first year that I did it. I had a good time and I learned a lot from it. Just put it that way.
So Dave, did you actually participate in the pouring of the beverage in a competition?
No, I have actually volunteered predominantly in the Brewers Cup, which is alongside the barista competition. It's more for pour overs. I was a timekeeper, several other things, and I actually was a barista in the BGA Cafe one year. Basically, you just get to go around and taste really good coffee and watch people's routines and learn a lot from that.
I mean, it must smell amazing.
Oh, absolutely. And to this day, that is still my favorite thing about coffee in general. I've heard some people say that they can get tired of it. I never tire of that. Every single day, they always laugh at me, the younger baristas, because if we're really slammed and we need to make a couple pots of coffee, I will always do it just because I can stand there over the grinder and get high for a few seconds, So I love it.
When you're at one of these competitions, do you have to cleanse your palate like you would when you're sampling wines?
Oh, absolutely. They always have some little sparkling water or just regular still water that you need to swish your mouth out, do whatever, stay hydrated as well. And for someone in my circumstance, I have to watch the caffeine intake. So it's small tastes, not large cups of it.
Yeah.
And so you've tried a little of everything. Have you ever tried the civet poop coffee?
I have not. The Kopi Luwak. I've definitely heard about it, and I'm not opposed to it. I just don't have. What was the last I saw going for $600 a pound at one point? That's a little out of my league.
It's like the Dom Perignon of coffee.
And for those that don't know about it, the civet. What is the civet? Is a small mammal, right? Or like a rodent?
It's kind of a wild cat.
Yeah, and it eats the coffee beans when they're green, or the berries, and it digests it, and it takes the fruit off the berry, and so all you have left is the little seed, and it goes through its digestive enzymes and comes out, and it's delicious coffee when it comes out, but you're definitely eating it out of poop.
I thought you said poop, but I wasn't sure.
No, it's a real thing. You guys can Google it. Anybody who's listening, it's real.
There's even an elephant poop coffee now as well from India, I believe.
Oh my gosh. All right. So you've been a barista. Elephant poop. Okay. You've been a barista for how many years? Like 10 years or so?
No, it's all together about 6 or so. And, that's pretty much where I am. But I was kind of a home coffee geek for like 18 before that. So. Okay.
So you've really been into coffee for a long time.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's saying something because in my 20s, for a while, I was an over-the-road truck driver and a trainer for a company for about 5 years. And it's funny that I'm a connoisseur now because I have consumed with gusto the nastiest, old, burnt, over-extracted, been sitting on a hot plate for 14 hours coffee in middle America at 2 o'clock in the morning and been supremely grateful for it because it was merely a drug to keep going.
You have felt the pain and the joy.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, tell us about Floyd and Blackie's. It is a unique coffee shop. I don't think there's another one like it. So describe it to our listeners.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. It's a small building right on the South Fork River. It was built in 1949 and was the town clinic, the town doctor's office for about 60 years. So in the back, we have very small rooms that were exam rooms, and we have converted those some into storage. They rent 1 or 2 of them out for office use. We have a couple of them that people can reserve for little meeting rooms. It's just very neat. The layout is interesting. It's not like any other coffee shop I've been in. And we do a little bit of everything. We do, hopefully, really good espresso drinks, just kind of in the classic style. Good drip coffee as well. We serve Hershey's ice cream. We have pastries from 3 or 4 different local bakeries. We've been doing breakfast cooked homemade there since July. So it's doing very well, and it's become kind of the unofficial community hangout place.
Yeah, we discuss that a lot. Just about every time we talk about coffee shops, we discuss how they are community centers now.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's definitely that vibe in Floyd and Blackie's. I'm not in that community often, but I can tell when I walk in that people are just bumping into each other there and casually just grouping off in small conversations. And then some people are, mindfully, like I popped in with my cousin, like I plan to spend time with her there because it's a good place to just sit and chat. But this whole business about renting kayaks and canoes is unique.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
That is Greg, one of the 2 owners, Greg and Kathy. They named the place for their two grandfathers, actually, who were close friends. But one of his side businesses is called the Floating Goat, and because it's right by Goat Island Park, so he rents canoes and kayaks pretty much about half the year, and they go like crazy.
Do you get a lot of tourists, or is it people mostly from the area that come there?
It's a little bit of everything. People find out about it as they come and get coffee or a sandwich maybe, and then they think about it and call in and, well, hey, can I reserve a couple kayaks for, Thursday afternoon or whatever. So it's pretty cool.
So the Goat Island Park, what is the story there?
Well, the reason it's called Goat Island, it's an island in the middle of the river that was formed from silt. So it's gotten progressively larger over the years. And this was before I was born, but I have heard that when it was newly formed, Mr. Kramer, who was still here with the Cramerton Mills, did not want it to grow up into a jungle pretty much. So he put some goats on the island to keep all the vegetation eaten down. And they had even constructed stilt houses with ramps up to them so that they could get out of the water if it flooded or anything. But they were there for a long time, so it just became informally known as Goat Island. And now there's a park.
Yeah, now there's no more goats, but the name remains. And there's this pretty wide pedestrian bridge that leads from the downtown where if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see Dave. You just go across that bridge and you're right over there at the Goat Island Park, and they have lovely elaborate swing sets. They have exercise machines, like outdoor exercise machines. They have disc golf over there, a beautiful walking path, and just benches along the waterfront where you could just go and sit and watch everyone paddling or just enjoy, the riverfront.
It's pretty awesome. And they also rent out a couple of the picnic shelters there. People have family meals or, community gatherings. And as I look right now, I see probably 10 or 15 people and kids playing on the equipment over there. So it's pretty awesome.
And Cramerton, when I was growing up, Cramerton was not as rambunctious and active in its population as it is now. I feel like it has been revitalized in the last decade or so. Is that your perception too?
Absolutely. I moved back here in 2011, and it has grown a lot since then, and the demographics have changed a little bit. It's kind of young and happening at this point, which is very interesting.
And so they have like all these little
like small town where near Charlotte. So probably a lot of people like work in Charlotte or that kind of thing.
Absolutely. The whole time I was growing up, they always suggested that this may at some point sort of become, at least in part, a bedroom community for people who worked in Charlotte. And a lot of that has happened.
So if you can imagine like a bunch of little mill houses that I don't think they're more than 1,000 square feet each, right?
Pretty much. That's about pretty exactly small. Right.
Yeah, they're pretty small, and they're just lined like all up. They're pretty close to the road and stacked up on top of each other. But I don't think there's an HOA. I don't think there's any organization like governing how they care for these homes, but they are each one lovingly cared for. The yards are maintained. They're all different colors, different. You can see a person's personality on how they've decorated the front porches.
Absolutely. It's awesome. And you're right. People take pride in them. They're very well kept, and they're built solidly. They've been here since about 1915 or 1920, and it's pretty cool. They're selling like crazy whenever one goes on the market.
I've never even seen a for sale sign because I guess as soon as for sale, it's gone.
Pretty much.
Right. I really love what's happening in Cramerton because we're, as a society, like I think there's a certain culture of people that don't want to live in sprawling suburban 2-acre plots of land where we really want community, and these old neighborhoods like this have that built into them. And so you could reduce your floor plan, get to know people in your walkable community, and then you've got the bonus of that riverfront right there. I just think Cramerton is adorable.
It's neat, and it's a good, safe place to walk, which I do for my health stuff a lot. And it's beautiful. You always run into someone that you know, and it's just a cool little place.
Yeah, so if you're listening and you're in the Charlotte area, this is worth your little detour. It'll take you about probably 20 minutes to get there from West Charlotte, and you should just pop in there and see this place. It's wonderful. Let's see. Have you ever been out on the water?
I have. I haven't done it with the ones that we rent, but I have been not in a kayak, but in a canoe many times as I was growing up. Several friends had them, and we used to just tool up and down the river.
Yeah, it's so cute. We saw tons of turtles and lots of birds. It's gorgeous because it's sort of unspoiled, especially the Goat Island area, like where the park isn't located, but other sections of the island, there's still like little turtles sunning themselves and water birds.
Absolutely. The occasional snake.
The occasional snake. We did see that too.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Austin, I got to take you there sometime.
Yeah, I would love to see it.
Okay, well, Dave, you and I and Austin and our listeners too, we all have a friend in common. You guys might remember Todd Williams from episode 8. He's hard to forget. That man makes his own cheerwine gelato in Kannapolis, North Carolina. Well, Dave and Todd are longtime friends, and Dave and I figured this common connection to Todd years ago when we first met. And what happened is Todd had left Gastonia, and he had taken all the yummy coffee right with him when he did. And I was visiting my parents, desperate for something delicious. And I saw this Floyd and Blackie situation on Yelp, and I was like, I'll give it a try. So I walk in, and Dave is in there making coffee, and it is every bit as delicious as what Todd was pouring. And so I was delighted, completely delighted. And I told him that I had come from the Wired Espresso. What did he call it? Is it Wired Coffee Espresso? Wired Coffee Espresso. Yeah,
Coffee Espresso.
Wired Coffee Espresso. That was Todd's business. And I had, transferred myself over to Floyd and Blackie's under duress. But it turned out to be great because I got to meet you and drink your delicious coffee until you left and left me in sadness too.
Well, I really appreciate the compliment, but yes, Todd is the best adjective is probably that he is very Todd. And he's a good friend. He's a really excellent, genuine person. And he early on made me maybe the first espresso shot that literally pretty much brought tears to my eyes because it was so amazingly delicious. And I had not experienced anything of that caliber at that point. I was still living in Atlanta, and I was visiting my parents here. And I did the same thing you did. I used Yelp, and I was like, man, I need some coffee, and I don't want to go to, a big chain or whatever. And I found his place in Gastonia, which had only been open, I don't know, a year, maybe 2. And here was this grumpy guy, that didn't have a lot to say. And it was late at night. I was probably right when he was about to close. And he just drew me this espresso shot, and I paid him. I turned around, I took a sip, and it just knocked me flat. It was amazing. And we struck up a friendship right at that point. And we still have a good one today. And I try to make it over to his spot in Kannapolis as often as possible. In fact, it's time for me to do that again. So thank you, Todd.
Thank you, Todd, for everything. I know he listens to the podcast. So you've known him probably about as long as I've known him then.
I've known him for a good 10 years anyway.
Yeah, I think that's about there's something like that. So fast forward to Thanksgiving 2018, so just a month ago, I pop into Floyd and Blackie's, and I'm hanging out with my cousin Corbin, and we walk in, and I see you at the counter, but you look so different to me that I wasn't sure you were who I thought you were, and we both had this big pause, and we figured out, yeah, we do know each other, and so I said, what's going on? Like, why do you look so different? And you started to tell me what had changed. And the minute you started into your story, I was like, don't tell me anymore. I want this on the podcast. So y'all, I've not heard this story either, but I could tell it was going to be an amazing one. So let's hear it.
Okay, where to start on this? During my sabbatical from Floyd and Blackie's, when I was doing all my coffee learning and networking and such, I actually was volunteering in Knoxville, Tennessee at one of the preliminary competitions in January 2017. And that night in my hotel room, I had kind of a fast heartbeat tachycardia event. And I thought, well, it's too much caffeine and not enough water and not enough food, that sort of thing. I got through it and thought everything was okay, but I didn't feel exactly right. So about 3 weeks later, I had another event back at home in Cramerton. Felt really scared, called 911. Got there late on a Sunday night. The next morning, in the midst of a million tests, the guy who is now my cardiologist said, well, we have some issues, not exactly sure what, but I can tell you the underlying cause. And he had diagnosed me as having a genetic disorder that I was unaware of. I have the heterozygous form of familial hypercholesterolemia or familial hyperlipidemia, which causes my body to make bad LDL cholesterol 24/7 like a factory. So, long story short, one of my coronary arteries had 8 different sections of 90 to 95% blockage with an aneurysm in between each one of those. And it was basically kind of too dangerous to stent. Only one doctor was willing to try, and he said I had a 50% chance of surviving the procedure, and a little too lengthy to bypass. So they tried to deal with it with medication, and then 1 month later, I had kind of the mother of all heart attacks when it closed up 100%. It's a really extraordinary story. I died for 80 minutes. They did CPR the entire time. Shocked me 24 times, went outside the normal drug protocol, got me back, coma for 2.5 days, in the hospital for 13, implanted defibrillator, long recovery, and I feel really great now, but I still have a 100% occluded right coronary artery. However, they think I've grown some natural bypasses around it. So I do everything that they tell me to do. I'm on lots of medications, and I have to watch stress and getting overheated or anything like that. But I'm learning what my new normal is, and at this point, I love it. I get to work in an industry that I really enjoy and share the love that I have for that with other people. And one addendum to that is really the most important takeaway for me. I had a really powerful near-death experience that largely has come back to me in memory. And all I can say is it was the most overwhelming, unbelievable, unconditional love I have ever felt in my life. And I really believe that one of the reasons I made it back here is to just share that love with everyone else. So that's pretty much my story.
Wow.
So, I mean, this is big.
Pretty big.
So the 80 minutes that you were coding, do you have memories, specific memories, or just that feeling?
Some specific memories. This is one that always blows everybody's mind. I don't know at what point in the process this happened, because I pretty much died in the ambulance on the way, and I told the paramedic that I was about to, and I was cool with it. I felt this peace and love, and I was trying to keep her from breaking down emotionally. And I just kind of said, okay, I think I'm out. And I never expected to open my eyes again. The next thing that I remember was awakening, didn't feel much of anything, saw people around me that I didn't know. And the very first thing I heard, it's like a bad episode of ER, I heard a loud clinical voice say, "Clear!" And I knew exactly what was about to happen at that point. So I experienced a full 300 joule defibrillation, wide awake. That was something that you don't forget. And then the doctor in charge and I made heavy eye contact. He got this horrified look on his face, turned to the person to his left and said, "I think he just woke up right there." And I passed right back out. And the memory of a lot of the other ones has come back after the fact, but I was in a different space. It's as if I was more of a kind of an impartial bystander, knew what was happening, wasn't overly concerned one way or the other. And I could hear the defibrillator charge up and knew to the millisecond when I was going to get a shot, but it didn't matter. And I remember once thinking, wow, they're actually going to try again. And hey, it worked. So what can I say? Way to go.
So 90 minutes, they're shocking you.
Pretty much, yeah.
Or 80 minutes.
80 minutes, yep.
Wonder, did you get a sense from your practitioners, like, why they kept going? Like,
yeah, the person in charge let me interview him for about 30 minutes a week after the fact. And I'm not going to name names here, But he told me all the things that you would normally expect. And then he had a little grin on his face. And he said, okay, now do you want the honest answer? And I said, yes. And basically he said that it was pissing him off because this is something that should have worked and it wasn't. And they couldn't understand why. And he just kind of, to a certain degree, it was a little bit of doctor's ego. He kind of refused to give up. And I'm grateful for that in retrospect.
Some stubbornness comes in handy.
Sure. And another part of that is a lifelong friend of mine who's 2 days younger than me. We grew up together in school and church and such, was the alternate pharmacist for the code team. And she was the one working that day. And they were about to give up. And he asked if anyone had any ideas. And from her many years of experience, she had notes in her lab coat and mentioned a drug that they hadn't used in many years that she might have some of. And they maybe would give it a try. Well, it turns out that saved my life. I established a normal heart rhythm after that. And she checked, and they had last dosed that medication in 1991 at that hospital. So Pretty cool.
It's who you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the feeling, you said that you had like a really incredible feeling of like overall peace or acceptance of what was going on. Do you feel like you still have access to that all the time, or do you just like not necessarily always have access to it, but sometimes it comes to you in epiphanies? Or
that is an excellent, excellent question. And the answer to that is early on, I felt that I had access to it pretty much all the time. And I can still get there if I meditate or just calmly focus on that. But it's not quite as easy as it was the farther I get away from it in time. It's still my inspiration, though. I realize that it's real. I realize that I was there. And so that kind of drives me to share that with other people. And if I can do that through coffee, all the better. I can combine the two things.
Coffee is halfway there.
Yep.
Are you able to drink coffee still?
Yeah, that's interesting. For about the first 5 months, they didn't let me have any caffeine at all. And that was pretty heavy for someone like myself. But fortunately, I know some people in this industry, and so many very cool people heard about it and sent me freshly roasted decaf that they wanted me to try. And it was phenomenal, especially when I couldn't have anything else. So to this day, I still drink a good portion of decaf because I limit my caffeine a lot during the day.
No, I've heard that French press coffee can have cholesterol in it, or that if you're watching some sort of intake, to stay away from French press. But I don't know, is that like the good kind or the bad kind, or?
Yeah, apparently there are two different lipids in unfiltered coffee that can do bad things to your cholesterol levels. But this is going to sound like a total cop-out, but for someone in my circumstance, they told me early on, yes, diet and lifestyle are important, and I do focus on those. But he said, in your case, it's kind of meds or die, boy. So they have my numbers where they want them, and I drink predominantly a little bit of espresso in some form or another, and then paper filtered pour overs. So I don't do nearly as much French press as I used to, but I do love the stuff. But I'm not going to take any chances on that at this point.
Yeah. And I think that's why you looked so different to me because, I don't know if you know this, I'm a massage therapist, so I'm a body worker. I'm looking at energy all day long with people. And your energy shifted so thoroughly that I almost couldn't recognize your physical self because you were so changed.
Wow. Interesting. I'd love to hear your detail on that at some point.
It's just when a person is stressed out, like they carry their bodies differently, and the face it's physically different, and
right.
There's such a softness about you now that that when I'm reading energy with people, I can sense who you are even before I get close to you. And so what was happening that day was that I'm seeing this person that looks something familiar, but the energy coming from the person is not what I used to call Dave.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I understand that. Well, that makes perfect sense because I am not that same Dave.
You are not. And I mean, you were wonderful before, but you're super wonderful now.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I really try to throw that love out there to everyone. And if you get in the habit, it kind of does it on its own.
Seriously. I mean, it's easy. And I love that you're talking about how you, it's sort of like we talk about sometimes in different religions and faiths and meditations that there's a source energy that is pure love. And it sounds like during your 80-minute episode, you returned to that source on some level. And it's like getting your batteries recharged.
I think that's a wonderful description.
And the further you get away from it, the more your batteries are losing their power. But
yeah.
But going back as an adult, like as an aware adult, you see this with all kinds of near-death experiences and people who meditate for, I don't know, years on end. That return to source is it's an exercise that you can develop, like strengthening a muscle, and you keep bringing that love out with you when you do. I just think that's beautiful.
Absolutely.
Austin, do you have any experience with this sort of thing? Or are we just talking?
I mean, I had a little, I had something that happened where I got injured really badly, and I had to have surgery while I was wide awake and that kind of thing. And I definitely experienced, like, it's something where if somebody told me this was about to happen to me, I would have been terrified. But when I was going through it, I realized I could manage it, and I did feel like sort of a surrender to the situation where I wasn't as afraid as I would have thought I would have been. And so, and even coming out of it for like months after, it wasn't nearly the near-death experience you had. Although had I not gone to the emergency room, I definitely would have died. And so I understand, at least to some extent, that.
Yeah, I think that's very similar.
Fascinating. All right. Well, do you have any more questions, Austin?
I don't. I'm just blown away.
I know. I'm blown away too. I knew I was going to be blown away. Well, I mean, obviously, you're taking care of yourself. You said you're exercising. What are you doing for fun these days?
Oh, I do a little bit of everything. I have close friends of mine that live in various parts of the country, a lot of them in various parts of the South. But I love being outdoors. I love hiking the little bit that I can do. I go to see friends in the mountains, back to Atlanta once in a while. I've even made it out your way. I have someone close to me. It's in Salt Lake City, so come through that area. I used to be a photographer. I have various things that pique my interest all the time, and I can't get away from the coffee geek thing. As crazy as it probably sounds, working as a barista, right now I'm geeking out on this new little really trick hand grinder that I got, and I play with that at home a lot too. So it's coffee seems to be the focus at this point.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. If you're ever out in Denver, you should come see me.
I shall, I guarantee.
And same goes for San Francisco.
And I will. I actually made a road trip in 2014 where I did a lot of at that time bucket list coffee shops on the West Coast, and I was very near you. I went to what is now known as Chromatic Coffee. Can't remember the town, but it's right there on the bottom of the bay. And they were really, really good. It used to be known as Barefoot Coffee before they changed. But I experienced a lot of good stuff out there. But next time I will definitely come see you, Austin. I enjoyed hearing your story in the first episode of the podcast.
Oh, great. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And now, free room for you.
Oh, awesome. I'll always take that.
Yeah.
And it's the best location in town because it's near Austin.
Oh, there you go.
And Muni.
It's true. There's no better way to see San Francisco than with Austin.
Awesome.
That should be the tagline. Like, welcome to San Francisco. There's no better way to see it than with Austin. Well, let's talk about your favorite coffee shops.
Oh man, that's hard to narrow down because I have a lot. And as you might imagine, every time I get the chance, I try a different one. I certainly have my favorites. I've been to the original Stumptown in Portland, several other well-known coffee shops. I think maybe the best traditional cappuccino I ever had was at Espresso Vivace in Seattle. And I was a big David Schomer fan, geek for a good little while. I read his books when I really got interested in all this on a high level. There was one in Portland that uses a Rancilio lever machine. Oh man, the name escapes me. Spella Cafe, and that was really, really good espresso. There's one in Atlanta it's a strange name for a coffee shop. It's Chrome Yellow Trading Company, and they actually do better shots of Stumptown's Hairbender than I had at the first Stumptown location. Not that that was bad by any means. I love, let's see, Not Just Coffee in Charlotte. They're really good. Obviously, you may have heard of this place in Kannapolis called Wired Coffee Express, and that's always fantastic. Plus, you get to spend time with Todd, and you never know what's going to come up in that conversation. So that's pretty awesome. There's a lot, and the thing I like about this, Charlotte has a pretty emerging coffee community. There's even an informal group, the Charlotte Coffee Collective, that I think has over 300 members in it now, and it's kind of competitive, but not. It's more like a sense of community. Like people share their knowledge freely, help each other out. And another thing I do kind of on the side, I'm not a full hardcore machine tech, but I do a lot of stuff in that realm. And you may have seen when you were here, I can't remember if we had installed it yet, but we now have a 25-year-old Rancilio machine and Floyd and Blackie's that I love and all the young baristas love. So I love playing with all that stuff.
What's different about that machine? Like what do you love so much about it?
Well, it's small, yet powerful, and it just seems to pull really, really consistent shots. And the one change I made to it was I put the modern, what they call their clever steam valves on it that just lock open. And the young baristas love that because they can focus more on texturing the milk and not have to hit the panic button when they think they're going too far with it and, crank and crank and crank on the valve. They can just kind of knock it down and it's done. Mm-hmm. So on their own, they've started doing lovely textured milk and sort of informally competing with one another in latte art and that sort of thing. And just kind of makes me feel good.
That's wonderful. Well, tell us before we let you go, what's your best advice you could give a person?
Oh, just in general?
Mm-hmm. I feel like you might have some words of wisdom for us. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here.
No, that's good. That's an excellent question. Sort of push down on the hate, the adversarial thoughts that we all have, because what I have found through my experience, definitely, but also just as I age a little bit, all the things that we think are really big, glaring differences, actually, when you get down beneath the surface, really aren't. And no matter how we might categorize ourselves, we are all more alike than we are different. And that love that I felt, I absolutely guarantee you applies to every single human being. And I try to remember that. I still have my moments like we all do, but I wish everyone the best. My greatest hope would be that everybody on earth could be happy and fulfilled in whatever it is that they want to do and share that joy with everyone else.
I love that.
Awesome.
I don't think we can do anything better than that for an ending. Yeah, we're done. That's it. We want to thank Dave for being with us today and thank all of our listeners for joining us. We want to hear from you guys too. So if you've got a barista or a coffee industry expert, maybe it's you that needs to be featured on our show, write to us and tell us. Send us your questions about coffee. Our email address is info at baristaunfiltered.com. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. We have 32 YouTube followers now, so we're getting really close to our subscriber goal of 100. We're very excited about that. If you've got time to write us a review on Apple's iTunes podcast app, that helps too. We've got some podcast patrons now through Patreon, so if you want to join those cool kids and support the podcast, you can check that out at patreon.com/baristaunfiltered. When we sign off, I'm Jodie Lee.
I'm Austin Miller.
I'm
And we
Dave
hope you
Dellinger.
guys stay caffeinated and y'all be good. Bye.
See ya.